Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna Danziger-Halpern, and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Women's History. And on behalf of Valerie Paley, our Senior Vice President, and Sue Ann Weinberg, Director of the Patricia D. Klingenstein Library, I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the New York Historical Society today. And happy Women's History Month. Although, as we like to say, every month is Women's History Month at New York Historical. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Louise Muir, our President and CEO, Agnes Shu Tang, Chair of the Board of Trustees, and Pam Schaffler, our Chair Emerita, and all of our trustees, Joyce B. Cowan, Diane Max and the late Adam Max, and the Mellon Foundation, along with our Chairman's Council, our members, and our many other generous donors. None of the work of New York Historical is possible without your continued and committed support. I also wish to recognize the guidance of our Scholarly Advisory Board, including our chair, Dr. Alice Kessler-Harris, and Reverend Dr. Katharine Henderson, who's here today in our first panel, whose advice and assistance has been critical for convening today's events. The Center for Women's History is the first center of its kind within the walls of a major museum in the United States. And in only a few short years, we've been able to accomplish so much in terms of scholarship, education, programs, collecting, and not least of all, exhibitions, all of which foreground women's critical role in American history. Since 2017, the Joyce B. Cowan Women's History Gallery has been the venue for many important exhibitions, including our current one on view now on the fourth floor, just opened last week, Kara Walker, Harper's Pictorial History of the Civil War Annotated. We are indebted to Joyce Cowan for her visionary support. And now it's my delight, after all of that preamble, to welcome you to our 8th annual Diane and Adam E. Max Conference on Women's History. This conference, which was the brainchild of Diane Max and her late husband, Adam, was established in 2016, even before the bricks and mortar of our center were even set. We are so grateful to the Maxes for their imagination and impetus to set this cornerstone of our work. We are excited to be gathering here together in person again, as we've done in years past. We'll also be rolling out additional programming under the Max Conference umbrella, in person and remotely over the course of Women's History Month and beyond. Today's conference, as well as future content, will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website for those who are unable to join us live. To those of you watching post-conference, thank you for taking time to join us as we contemplate this year's important topic. Our theme this year, as you all know, is Keeping the Faith, Sex, Gender, and Religion. When we look at the divisions fracturing society today, many of us point to organized religion as a restrictive force, regulating and limiting gender roles. Yet, faith-based communities have also provided avenues for women and LGBTQ+ individuals to pursue leadership opportunities and to push for broader gender equality from within their traditions, complicating any simple views of religion and partisanship. It's a broad and complicated topic. The intersections among diverse religious traditions, women's activism along a host of different issues, and gender are complex and interwoven. When we thought about how to organize this day and the events leading through the spring, we contemplated the different ways that women and LGBTQ+ individuals have shaped and transformed not only their own faith, but also the religious lives of their communities throughout our nation's history. Today's 3 panels, focusing on the common good, on gender and leadership, and on reproductive justice, represent only a handful of the different issues we could have potentially covered, and indeed only include a very small selection of the practitioners engaged in these movements today. Thankfully, as I've mentioned, we have additional programs in the works throughout the next few months that will cover other facets of our topic and bring in even more diverse voices of scholars, practitioners, and other leaders. The first of these events is in just a few days on March 9th, as we welcome Mitchell Gohl to the stage for a panel titled Religion and Gender, the Good, the Bad, and the Future. Mitchell is a strong advocate for LGBTQ+ rights related to faith, and we look forward to his discussion with Reverend David Gushee and journalist and author Katharine Stewart on Thursday. Later this spring, we'll also have a virtual program at a date still to be scheduled on how religious and faith-based communities allow women to expand their roles in charity and philanthropy. The conversation will feature Karma Lekshi Somo, Brenda Child, Hasia Diner, and Serene Jones. Please stay tuned to our website and our e-blasts for the latest on our upcoming programming. And even with all of these programs, as I mentioned, we're just scratching the surface of this important and complex topic. And we hope that these critical conversations spark further and wider dialogue and debate. The many intersections of this topic are particularly important to New York Historical, not only because of our work in the Center for Women's History, but because of the ways we're deepening the center's footprint to encompass larger issues of gender. This is all the more critical as we forge our partnership with the nascent American LGBTQ+ Museum and welcome it into its future home within our expanded building, which broke ground in late 2021 and is set to open in just a few years. In addition, we'll have a new major exhibition here at the museum opening in September, which addresses many of the themes that we'll be discussing today. Acts of Faith, Religion and the American West will examine the role of religion in the 19th century and how Western expansion changed America's religious landscape. The show's vivid stories about people, religion, and place, with women often the driving force, uncover some of the important roots of our religious diversity while illustrating how religion was both a unifier and a divider during this critical time in history. Now, to turn to our first panel today, Believing in the Common Good, Women, Religion, and Economic Justice. For many women, faith traditions can inspire and mobilize actions for social justice and economic reform. Likewise, growing income inequality, the persistence of poverty, and declining social mobility and other economic realities shape women's religious experiences, beliefs, and communities. Our conversation today will discuss this intersection, the popular narrative of the common good, and economic justice for women as a means of strengthening faith-based communities. You can read more about our panelists in the program, but to briefly introduce their accomplishments, Bishop Pat Bumgardner is currently the senior pastor of Metropolitan Community Church of New York, where she has served in multiple capacities over the last 30 years. She's also the executive director of MCC's newly formed Global Justice Institute, the founder of the Sylvia Rivera Memorial Food Pantry in Sylvia's Place, and a leading visionary in the quest of the queer community to build coalitions and deal with hunger and homelessness, as well as homophobia and social prejudice. Jennifer Jones Austin is a fourth-generation leader of faith and social justice and fights for equality. As CEO of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, she has led and secured monumental changes in social policy to strengthen and empower the disenfranchised and marginalized. She serves as the vice chair of the board of National Action Network, member of the Farrick Center of Social Justice Advisory Board, member of the Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior Advisory Board at Harvard, and a scholar in residence at Nyack College and Alliance Theological Seminary. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is a pastor, biblical scholar, author, and the director of the Kairos Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice at Union Theological Seminary. She's also co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, alongside the Reverend Dr. William Barber II. She has written multiple books and is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. Sunita Viswanath is a women and human rights advocate who mobilizes Hindus to connect their faith to social justice and to oppose caste in Hindu nationalism. She is co-founder of several human rights organizations, including Hindus for Human Rights, Sadhana, Women for Afghan Women, and Abad. Sunita was awarded the Feminist Majority Foundation's Global Women's Rights Award in 2011 and was honored by President Obama at the White House in 2015 as a champion of change. And they're joined by our moderator, Dr. Katharine Henderson, who's President Emerita of Auburn Seminary and currently Senior Advisor for the Interfaith Alliance in DC, an organization focused on building democracy and inclusive religious freedom for all, where all can thrive. She's the author of God's Troublemakers, How Women of Faith Are Changing the Field. So welcome, everyone.
So welcome, colleagues and friends. I am so excited to be with you all today and all of you here. You come from different contexts, congregational life, nonprofits. You bring national, global, New York City experience and exposure. You know intimately the stories of women and children and folks without homes and migrants and immigrants and LGBT folks and trans youth. In other words, the stories that you hold within you are often of people on the margins. Liz, in a recent article I was reading online that you wrote about the Davos conference, you talked about the fact that economic justice and poverty were not words that were mentioned at this conference, at the World Forum. They were noticeably absent. And we are not afraid to say those words here, poverty and economic justice. So at this moment, somewhere around half of the US population live in poverty, which affects women and children disproportionately and people of color. Despite being the most educated of any demographic, Black women earn 64 cents to the dollar that white women earn. Many people live a pay cut, a layoff, an accident, a storm, or medical crisis away from disaster. And the federal guidelines for the poverty level remains $27,000 for a family of 4. We have no guaranteed paid parental and family leave. So that's just a start. But I'm going to ask you to start, Liz, and then each of you in succession. So how do you enter this conversation on economic justice?
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. And it's amazing to be in this group of amazing leaders. So indeed, I mean, we're living in one of the richest countries in the world, at one of the richest moments in history in terms of, I can speak up. You know, at one of the, kind of most productive moments in history. And yet, across the world and in this country, people are living on the edge. And not a small number, not any one demographic, although, as Katharine was saying, disproportionately people of color and women and queer folk, and young folk and old folk. So a lot of folk are disproportionately poor and low income. And yet it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, we live in this very wealthy country, I live in a very wealthy city here in New York City. And in our nation, we throw out more food than it takes not just to feed every hungry person in this country, but around the world whole over. I have been involved in anti-poverty organizing and homeless organizing for 30 years now. And in cities across the country, including New York City, there are 5 abandoned homes for every homeless person. And our city spends $1 billion on homelessness every year. But it's on managing homelessness, not eradicating it. And so we have no scarcity of resources. Jesus, who I follow, says, I have come so that you may have a life and have it to the abundance. We live in abundance. We don't live in scarcity, but we do have a scarcity of political will and kind of moral consciousness to actually do what needs to be done, what we know what to do. One small example from the last couple of years, we extended a child tax credit in this country at the heart of the pandemic. And it didn't do enough. It didn't touch enough people, but it did lift 4 million kids from below the poverty line to above the poverty line. Made a world of difference. Meant that some folks got to take ballet lessons for the first time. Parents didn't have to worry about not having enough food at the end of the month. And then all unanimously, our politicians decided not to extend it. We lifted 4 million kids above the poverty line, and then we sent them right back. And they were just a fraction of the folks that were hungry. I mean, more than half of the kids that live in this country live in food insecure homes. I mean, what is it? What is it? And we can do something about it.
So I'm like chomping at the bit.
Yes.
Okay, I can see that. So you just jump right in.
So what is it? It is structural economic deprivation. Mm-hmm. It's willful, intentional structural economic deprivation. When, during the pandemic, the child tax credit was increased to allow more children and families to have more in their homes, the narrative then developed. We're lifting children, so many hundreds of thousands of children, out of poverty. It was a lie. It was a lie because this nation knew that it was undercounting poverty. You mentioned the federal poverty measure. Family of 4 making $27,751 is considered in this nation to not be poor. One individual making $12,800 or more is considered in this nation living anywhere, be it Brooklyn, New York, or Wichita, Kansas, to not be poor. And what do they do with that? They set federal minimum wages off of that. The federal minimum wage today is $7.25 an hour. When annualized, working full-time, that's $15,000. So, traditional family, 2 adults, 2 children, 2 adults making, working full-time, 15,000 times 2 is 30,000. Lo and behold, they and their 2 children are above the federal poverty level. They're not poor. They use that measure to justify a woefully inadequate federal minimum wage, and then to justify eligibility levels that are too low for people to make ends meet. That federal poverty measure is used to set eligibility for child care, transportation, Medicaid, food supports. So if you suppress the federal poverty level, then you can justify a low wage. Mm-hmm. And even with people working, going to school, trying to get ahead, you can still say, well, they're just not doing enough. They're really, we've set this standard and they're just not doing enough. So for me, when I look at these issues, I appreciate too as a Christian that Jesus said the poor shall always be with you. But that didn't mean that we have to live like that. That just meant we have a responsibility to our fellow brothers and sisters, right? To all persons. The Bible, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, speaks about justice work. But we as a society have determined, sometimes using the Bible as our backstory, that it is okay to have a society where we engage year after year, decade after decade, century after century, in structural economic deprivation. And if we just do a little, that's good enough by God's eyes.
Yes, Anita, jump in here.
I am just back from 3 weeks in India and fighting jet lag. And my journey, it was 3 weeks through rural India in the north of the country. And if you read the newspapers and if you listen to the headlines out of the central government, you will hear about India becoming a superpower. G20 is the branding on everything, absolutely everything across the country, even in the villages. And as I traveled through, it was a pilgrimage to holy Hindu sites. And as I traveled with my colleague through the villages, I found people who were actually hungry, unemployed, struggling, depressed, everything you would imagine in a poor country, developing country like India. And yet, when you talk to people about the government, which is a Hindu nationalist government that is on a fast track to turning India from being a secular democracy into a Hindu nation, in spite of struggling, in spite of being hungry and unemployed, Hindu people, will have a positive word to say about that Hindu nationalist government, and that is because the Hindu right and the right in so many countries has done a genius job of making a majority feel like a minority. What's more, a targeted minority, a hurt minority. And it's just around the time that my heart is heavy with a memory from last year. This time last year, we were together in Selma. And it was an incredible experience for me. My organization, Hindus for Human Rights, we brought a diverse Indian delegation to Selma. We were Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Dalits, and secular people. And we traveled together as an Indian delegation because the Hindu right wants to destroy that diverse coalition. So we insisted on not being separated. And there we were in Selma. And on the morning of Bloody Sunday anniversary in Selma itself, Reverend Barber, every time I hear him speak, he does not compromise on the disproportional trauma on communities of color in this country of every unjust policy. That is stated unequivocally. And yet I have not heard him speak where he doesn't also say, whoever you are, black, white, or other, we need to have in our hearts the white poor. I've heard him say that every time. And that morning, when he started his sermon, he prefaced by saying that on his way to the church, he had stopped at the landmark where Viola Liuzzo, I hope I said that correctly, was assassinated by the KKK during the Bloody Sunday atrocities. She was assassinated there. She was a white woman from Detroit who had left her family and come at Martin Luther King's call to Selma to fight with everybody, and she was killed. And he said that he went to the landmark of her death, of her assassination, knelt and wept. I think it was very much on purpose that Reverend Barber started with that anecdote. It's because if we do not be radically inclusive in our thoughts around justice and economic justice, and while it's a disproportionate trauma on communities of color, the numerical majority is white in this country, is Hindu in India. If we do not pay close attention to that, we will not hit the targets that we want. We will not achieve economic justice.
Can I just quickly add on that? That's why I mentioned
Yes,
structural
and I
economic
wanted to get Pat's voice in here too.
But that's why I speak of it as structural economic deprivation. It knows no race. It knows no ethnicity.
Yes.
That's what it is in a nutshell. Structural economic deprivation affects every person who is without the income to meet their needs here in America. And that is largely white. Disproportionately people of color. But in mass numbers, it's more white persons.
We're going to get to structural and systemic change in just a minute. So Pat, jump in, get your voice in this mix.
Well, I think your original question was, where do I come at this from? And obviously I come at it largely from the LGBTQI community, but I think anecdotally I want to say that when, as a church, we entered into Sri Lanka and were working with people in extreme need and explaining who we were, the pastor that we were working with, it came out that he was not gay. And, but he said to us, if I have to be gay, I will. Meaning, the level of desperation.
Yes.
I'll be whoever you want me to be, just to be part of your community and what we might do together. And I think that part of what I'm trying to say is, and people are getting at here, is there's an intersection of many different things. While I'm primarily focusing on LGBTQI youth who are homeless or running a food pantry, on any given day at that food pantry, the majority of people may be Asian women lined up for food, and they could care less that I'm a lesbian or that this church is largely gay people. And I think the point is poor people kind of get that we're in this together. It's the rest of us that are kind of failing to get this or restructure our lives in ways that address this. So, if I'm giving out 2 bags of food to every person lined up, chances are they're out on the sidewalk redistributing that, sharing it in ways that get each person what they need. So I'm kind of coming at it from the perspective of, we're talking about economic justice, but it's not just economic justice. There's all kinds of issues here
Yes.
that feed into this that you kind of have to have your mind and heart and spirit attached to in order to make any kind of difference at all.
So Jennifer, we're going to come back to you now. You know, there's mitigation, things like, you know, job programs. We're getting to theories of change here, right? And then there's charity and philanthropic dollars that, you know, feed people, different kind, you know. But I think what we're talking about here is not tinkering
That's right.
with policy, but really trying to get, how do you disrupt and get at root causes and really disrupt systems and structures that exist and create something new?
So my father was a preacher, and my father said that the preacher should be the freest person on earth, because the preacher's allegiance should be to, and he was a Christian preacher, should be to the cross and not to the flag. What he was speaking to was the importance of speaking the truth about what is our nation, what is our society's greatest challenge. And very recently, just to bring it forward, I heard a priest say, what if we wake up and appreciate one day that just to be charitable is a sin against God? To not do justice work is a sin against God. I have worked in the policy-making space now for, almost 3 decades. And I felt good about some of the work that I've done. But it wasn't until I really started leaning in and looking at structural injustice and appreciating more and more. My father wrote a book titled God in the Ghetto. I actually republished it back in 2021 with some contemporary responses, one of them being from Reverend Dr. William Barber. The book is now God in the Ghetto, Prophetic Word Revisited. In the book, what Dad does is deconstruct the system of racism, capitalism, and militarism, all working to continually oppress people, and in the main, people of color. And what he helps you to appreciate is that racism is really just an effective tool, that what is most unjust is the way that we've structured our society with respect to capitalism. And that essentially what we do is we use racism, we use issues of gender, we use the LGBT community. We look to these persons to say that they are less than, and we try to find religion to justify that, beginning with Christianity. That, if you're not made in the image of the white male God, then you are less than and you are less worthy. And our system, our society has just kept reinforcing that. So the only way, in my estimation, in my opinion, again, after 30 years of doing policy work and feeling very proud of some of the work that I've done, but seeing that it almost is like a Band-Aid. If your foundation is flawed, if you build a house on a foundation that is flawed, no matter what you do to keep trying to prop that house up, it's going to keep falling, it's going to keep cracking. Our foundation's flawed because our foundation justifies an unjust society. So we have to get at the structural issues. And what I believe that means is, first and foremost, looking at, as we've done here in New York City, looking at like our Constitution, our charters, and what do we say about who we are as a people? So, again, as an example, in New York City, just recently we passed 3 charter revisions. One of the charter revisions has a preamble now that says we are a multiracial democracy, where everybody, regardless of who they are, however they identify, however they are identified, they are entitled to all that this city can provide, and that the city government has a responsibility to create that meaningful access. It's disrupting not just the policies, not just legislation. We tried to legislate our way out of racism. Didn't work. Because we never got to the structural underpinnings. That's some of the work that we have to do.
How do we disrupt systems? How do we change things at the root?
For me, it really goes back to the root within ourselves. And I'm informed by my faith tradition. But I think if I were not in this faith tradition, the teachings would be found in every other one as well. And even in just the question of what is it to be humane and what is it to be a part of humanity. And the teachings that I'm talking about are the ones that say that we are connected, we are one connected organism, that if you are hurt, then I am hurt. That in Hinduism, our texts teach us that God is in you or me, no matter who you are. And we are taught that the matter of, the substance of matter, whether it's people or any aspect of the universe, is the same. And there's good and bad in every one of us. All of these teachings, they might seem trite, but we definitely have lost our way. Because if we really acted in this world from that sense of oneness with each other, then we would not be in this situation where our policies and our laws discriminate. And so I really think that going to the root, that's the root we need to go back to see God or whatever is good in whoever comes in front of you. In Hinduism, there's so many stories where somebody shows up at your door. It's a stranger who shows up as a guest. And the person, the character, either treats the person well or treats the person badly. And depending on which, they're either given a curse or a boon. And that guest that showed up, the stranger, was God in disguise. There's a lesson in that. If we could just practice whoever it is that we're thinking about, it could be the worst person, it could be Modi, it could be Trump, I don't know. And we try to see, is there some place of humanity that we can connect to within that person? If we cannot do it, I think we're lost.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes the Band-Aid is the social disruptor more than we perhaps understand. Like, I'm thinking a lot today about our mayor deciding that it's going to be illegal for some place like MCC to have homeless youth sleep there. And if you know, I largely follow the Bible, but if you follow the Sopranos, you learn that you follow the money trail. And, you know, I think he's largely doing this so that he can steer homeless youth toward applying for housing vouchers, which is going to be very difficult, and turn over a very nice contract to a developer friend, or several contracts. That's what I think he's up to. Forgive me if I've miscalculated there, but my point is, you know, my saying, or any of the people housing homeless youth saying, over our dead bodies, do you make this illegal? And ours saying clever things like, okay, they won't sleep here, they'll rest here. If that's the language of the law, they'll rest here and they'll take showers here and they'll eat meals here and they'll get clean clothes here and they'll get comfort and care here and they'll watch movies here or whatever it is. That may seem like a Band-Aid if all you have is 6 or 8 or 10 or 17 or 30 kids, but it does disrupt the program, you know? And I think, yes, there have to be legislative answers, but there also have to be those of us who are kind of agitating and saying, you know, put me in a New York City, put me in the Tombs. Somebody else will come after me and do it. You cannot stop this.
That's right.
So Liz, you can take it any way you want to, but you know, in the title of this panel, we've got the word, the common good. So I don't know about you, I have some trouble with the idea of common good. What do you want to say about common good?
Well, I was raised by a.
Sorry, could the person who's speaking use the microphone?
So I have a
Is it-
microphone.
Trouble hearing.
Okay.
Okay, why don't you try?
All right. Is this going to be better?
Oh, good,
All right.
okay.
Well-
Thank you for speaking up,
Yes.
letting us know.
So I was raised by a mom who, from a very early age, would sit me down and lecture me about the common good. So I love getting a question about the common good.
Okay. I didn't know that either.
No. And, you know, I'm a biblical scholar, I'm an organizer, and I'm a pastor. And, you know, some of my favorite parts of Scripture are these sections of instruction, of prophetic text, of stories of miracles, where when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises, you know, instead of assuming that trickle-down works. And I think that is what the common good is. It's that if you start with those who have been pushed out, locked up, looked over, left out, if you start with you know, those who have to do the disrupting because people, you know, in the words of Howard Thurman, our backs are against the wall and all we can do is push. If you start with, you know, who Dr. King talks about, a new and unsettling force, who can kind of disrupt, unsettle a complacent national life by organizing poor and low-income people. Like, if you start with the bottom, then guess what? Everybody rises. And us kind of constructing an idea that that's possible, right? That it isn't that you have to rob Peter to pay Paul. It isn't that, you know, we're gonna fight over crumbs over here. It isn't that like me having means you not having. But actually, if you make sure that those that don't have to the full, guess what? There's always enough. And so I think that's the concept of common good that my mom taught me. And it was over whether I shared my ice cream, as well as if I was like waking up every day and saying, what can I do, you know, to disrupt? And now I read that quote from Dr. King every morning, and I read the Bible every morning. And I read and I say, if poor folk can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be this new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. And that disruption towards the common good is very hopeful in very hard times.
Talk a minute about, because talk about allies, or what allyship means in this context.
Are you asking me?
And anybody. I mean, because what you're setting up, it can be a sort of dualism too. The people at the bottom. So the question is, what does allyship look like?
I mean,
Does anybody want to jump in? Or?
I surely have answers, and I have the mic,
I
but
have thoughts.
all right, cool.
I have thoughts. I don't know if I have answers. I have thoughts. The first thought is that I completely agree with you, but I can't help but in this moment speak as a black woman and echo the words of Fannie Lou Hamer. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And while I completely agree, and I'm part of this movement in the Poor People's Campaign, and I'm with you all, it's a lot being placed upon those who've been marginalized and oppressed to have to be the ones who are continually disrupting. We can't walk away because our lives are at stake, our survival, not just thriving, but our survival is at stake. But come on now. You know, we need to, you use the word ally, and so I'll kind of pivot there. I actually don't like the word ally.
Okay, good.
I detest the word ally. Because to me, ally feels a little bit like, I'm in this, I'm like helping you out. This is your struggle, but I'm going to be a friend to you. Like, no, you should be like the comrade in the trenches with me, because this is all about us. And it's a society, it's a structure that was not created by little old me and my people. It was created by you and your power authorities from the very beginning. So we need to be more than allies, or those be more than allies. Be comrades. Be in the trenches, appreciating if you want to lean into the common good. We all can survive and to thrive in the society, but we have to revisit, to your earlier point, how we're thinking about these systems and these structures. And yes, it is charity and justice. It's both and. It's disrupting, as my daughter who's here has said to me before, it's the war of position versus the war of maneuver. Some of us have to be on the inside, fighting from within, and some of us have to be on the outside, agitating and pushing. But we can never forget that it's not just a policy, because as the General Counsel to Bishop Desmond Tutu told me oh so well when we were setting up the Racial Justice Commission, keep in mind, Jennifer, that whatever you do, they will find a way to work around it. So until you get to the foundation and you keep going at that foundation and try to disrupt that foundation, that structure, it's going to be Mayor Adams, it's going to be Mayor whoever, it's going to be Governor DeSantis, it's going to be Governor whoever. It's, forgive me, right? It's going to be the ultra-conservative who want to take away whatever opportunities have been forged. Until we keep pushing at this structure, this democracy that was racialized in and of itself. We're trying to save a democracy
Yes.
that was not a perfect democracy to begin with. So this is where we do the disruption. We challenge the structures. We challenge the funding, the program and the policy, but we have to challenge these structures.
Okay, Sunita, you're grabbing for the mic.
When you talk about democracy, democracy here and the democracy in India, two of the three countries where I immerse myself, the other being Afghanistan, it is really important that I share that the term, touted around is the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy, and it's usually, as a celebration when it's said. But both democracies are definitely in some kind of peril, for sure. And the connections between those jeopardies that's what I want to point out. When January 6th, when there was the attack on Capitol Hill in this country, there was the Indian flag flying high among the protesters. Steve Bannon was the chair of the Hindu Republican Council in this country. The RSS flag, RSS is a Hindu fascist organization, a member of whom killed Mahatma Gandhi. And the people in power in India today came through the ranks of the RSS. RSS's flag was recently, in November, raised on Parliament Hill in Canada. There's such an alignment of the far right in these countries and so many others, Israel, Brazil, et cetera, that we need, it is survival. We need our resistance movements to get beyond, words and identities and things that splinter us and get real and see each other, common good. There's a word in the Gita, loka samgraha. It means common good, it's beloved community. It includes all of us. We have to, it's the same point that I'm making over and over again. It's that root. We are not there. We're not seeing each other as comrades, as members of the same common good. And that's why they're winning. And that's why we're where we are. There's a term. We all, I hope, agree that Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, these are systemic, multi-generational systems of oppression, historical systems of oppression. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. So my people, the Hindu community in the world, have created what they call Hinduphobia. It's manufactured. Hinduphobia sounds like Islamophobia. So when a good liberal American or Brit hears it, they think, oh, it's a moment where in this multicultural West, we're trying to do better. And we're trying to fight xenophobia, we're trying to fight racism, we're trying to do a reckoning. And when you hear a Hindu group come and say, we're a brown-skinned targeted minority, and there's such a thing as Hinduphobia, and we're facing it, most good people will hear that and sort of put it in the wheelhouse of, oh, Yes, we are good people that will, that will not allow that. But actually, I'm a Hindu. I'm 55 years old almost. I have faced xenophobia. I grew up in the 80s in England. I walked around England in a sari and Doc Martens as a young person, looking cops, white cops in the face with audacity, with courage. That was my way of saying to somebody, you can't hurt me, you can't touch me. I know what racism is. I've never been discriminated against specifically because I'm Hindu. There has been racism, xenophobia, and there has been misplaced Islamophobia because people don't know the difference. There might be instances where somebody is discriminated against because they're Hindu, of course, but it is not, something that can be framed as this very large systemic injustice called Hinduphobia. We need to open our eyes. The wool is pulled over our eyes, and the best part of us is being manipulated. And that's why our democracies are in peril.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to have to wrap up here, but I have a question, and we could go on a long time. So everybody in this room has power. I mean, we mentioned the P word a little bit ago. It's sometimes a hard word for women. But I want to go back to this because everybody has power. We sit on boards, we sit at dinner tables, we have philanthropic power. So how can the people in this room, how can we, as a force, what was King's phrase?
A new and unsettling force.
A new and unsettling force. What can we use? I mean, you said you stood up in your Doc Martens and saris, looking police in the face. So, Pat, why don't you start down the row here? What can we do here with the power? What are your suggestions?
Well, I'm thinking a lot. It's Sunday, so I came from church.
Yeah, thanks.
And the reading we had today was the Transfiguration, right? Because it's the second Sunday of Lent. And there's a line in there where Jesus tells the disciples to get up. And when they get up, they see only Jesus. And so, one of the things we talked about was what do we see in ourselves or what do we see in other people, and kind of looking for that good thing in someone and really focusing on that and calling it out and trying to feed that, I think empowers people to be their best self. I often think a lot about September 11th and what happened in this city, and the people I met in the aftermath. One of the members of our church was burned, and there was a guy who put his hands on her face to put the flames out, and so then he was burned. But I ended up meeting him in the hospital, and he's like, a three-piece suit kind of guy. And we didn't really share much of anything in common except for this person that we both knew, him by accident, me more intentionally. But my point is kind of like seeing the good in him and trying to connect with that, and not probably all the terrible unethical things he did in the World Trade Center to get where he got, because people can criticize this, but I don't think you get rich by doing good things. That doesn't yell at me, throw stones at me, but I don't know any people who haven't done terrible things. I'm not saying they're terrible people. I'm saying to empower them and to empower all of us, we have to look for that spot of goodness and connect to that and call it forth and relate to that and try to get someplace from there.
Quick few words on power.
Power, so I'm going to pick up on the PP that you mentioned, philanthropic power. In this nation, so little funding is applied towards those institutions that are seeking to do structural change work. We put a lot of money into food pantries, soup kitchens, shelter. That's all critically important. I am not at all suggesting it's not. But very little funding, comparatively speaking, is put into those institutions that are trying to change things for people who've been marginalized and oppressed, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. And so power, a few dollars, going to institutions that are engaged in structural change, justice work, that's doing something.
So I think, to me, don't believe that things can't change. And then connected to that, don't believe that you don't have a central role in changing those things. Whatever it is that you know how to do. I knew a woman who, couldn't write press releases, couldn't, engineer things, but she knew how to get people's lights turned back on when they were turned off. So that's what she did. But I knew someone else who could write a press release, and someone else who could bring their whole family involved. We all have a lot of things to do, but don't believe that this is as good as it gets, because it's not. I think God intends something way better, and I think humanity needs a whole lot better.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think change begins with each one of us, and that's our power. And that means individual acts of resistance. So when Howdy Modi happened in Houston in the summer of 2019, 52,000 Hindus streamed into the stadium there where Modi and Trump, had a love affair on stage. But I was alone. There was no other Hindu with me. But I was outside with a sign that said, "Real Hindus don't lynch." I was in an ocean of Muslims, but I was the only Hindu that I knew that was there. And it's that individual act of resistance for me that made that day, worth living. I could look my kids in the eyes because I wasn't I could easily have been one of those 52,000 people. They look like me. And so whatever it is in the conversations we have, in the private family conversations we have, to when we, what is it, what's the term?
Unsettling force.
Unsettling force, or Gandhi's Satyagraha,
Yeah.
soul force. We have to find that within ourselves and not be afraid to speak the truth, step out of groupthink, and speak the truth in every given moment. That's our power. And if you put each one of our individual power together, there you have it. You have the movement that's going to make the change, which we will insist on.
So we could go on a very long time, but there are other panels to come, and the day is just beginning. So let us thank our wonderful panelists here, Sunita, Liz, Jennifer, and Pat.